And once again, encounter your scriptures, encounter your Holy Spirit, and to know and understand things that are true about us, things that are true about people in general, true things that can help us be effective in our pastoral counselling and pastoral care. And Father, as we come to this section on children, we know, Father, that children are greatly loved by you, and they are your gift to us, and you're concerned at what happens to the children, and people that don't treat children well are people who face your wrath and judgment. And Lord, you have entrusted to us children to care for, and we pray, Lord, that you would continue to exercise our hearts and show us where we can love our children well and love the children of others well, and hence help the people we work with to love their children well. And Lord, also we pray that you would give us, begin to give us that hope to believe that we can actually minister to children too in effective ways and access the hearts of children who might come to us seeking help, perhaps with their families and in family groups, and see them as people who can respond to the gospel in their hearts with that faith that Christ cherished so highly. So, Father, we commit ourselves to you this evening for that purpose, and ask, as in all things, that Christ would be honoured among us as we pray in his name. Amen. So tonight it's early childhood, 2 to 6. Next week there's no class. Week after that it's middle childhood, 7 to 12. And then after that, it's 2 nights on adolescence. Now, as we think about children, here's a book that I would recommend to you, Shepherding a Child's Heart by Paul Tripp. It's an outstanding book on helping you to access the hearts of children. $25. As we come closer to adolescence, here's another book by Ted's brother Paul Tripp on teenagers, age of opportunity, a biblical guide to parenting teens, $30. Since there's no required text purchases for this course, I can recommend these as worthy of your purchase. These are not being sold by GTC, they've been sold by the Counselling Centre, so you should give your money to me rather than wait for Wendy's invoice if you wish to purchase those. Early childhood, 2 to 6 years. Shepherding a Child's Heart, that's the one I just showed you. The old adage that children should be seen but not heard could not survive Freud's observation and research into child development. Freud and other theorists who looked at the childhood stage of development changed forever the way we look at children. Now we know the importance of reading to children, talking to them, playing with them, etc. While these things have always been done instinctively by parents, it was the stage theorists that taught us these activities were a necessary part of training and teaching children. Now, just to be clear here, we didn't need the theorists to tell us that children needed to be trained and taught. The scriptures are very clear about that, training and teaching children. Where the theorists did help us was on, particularly with young children, some of the effective ways of doing that, ways which do indeed access their hearts and bring about long-lasting life change. So we're going to look at the stage age theorists again, Freud and Erikson and Piaget and Kohlberg. So if you could have that diagram in front of you again, the one with the columns. That one. Freud and early childhood. For Freud, that's ages 3 to 6 is the phallic period. This stage of childhood responds to Freud's phallic stage, and since he believed that the unconscious drives us to maximize pleasure, that's the id in other words, the root cause of all behaviors then is the child's discovery of his or her erroneous zones the discovery that will drive their conscious behaviours for the rest of their lives. According to Freud, the parent's response at this early stage can distort the child's view of sexuality in general and the child's own sexuality in particular. How the parents respond to the child's self-discovery, if you like. Freud saw this as being the beginning of the conflict between the id and the expectations of society. It began here in early childhood, and the child spends the whole of their life in childhood and in adolescence fighting against that as the id drives them up to express those basic instincts. So the expectations of family and society press down on that, and the child that makes it successfully through adolescence in the area of sexuality is the child that, in Freud's view, reaches that state of superego. Evaluation. Freud's emphasis on the Eroneous zones led him to overemphasize infantile sexuality. He saw it all as very deterministic, with little hope of change in the individual after childhood. He discounted almost completely the positive influences of relationships and parental involvement on the child's development. He saw parental involvement as being all bad, all negative, and in his view the child should be left to explore and express their own sexuality to whatever extent they wished. And you can see where this leads. This leads to the legalisation of paedophilia. Paedophilia societies that claim that sex between adult men and boys is a good and a beautiful thing. It's giving these boys the opportunity to express their phallic stage. You can see also that it would lead to a tolerance in society if they go with Freud's views of promiscuity among teenagers, for instance, as they express their sexuality or their genital stage, as Freud labels it. I was speaking to an adult man who has lived an active homosexual lifestyle for many years, and he was telling me that when he was 5 years of age, he was staying with his grandmother, and his grandmother had a boarder there, a man in his early 20s, and this man was 5 years of age. And at some stage during that stay with the grandmother, this man took this little boy into the shower and abused him, sexually abused him. And I said to this man, that sounds like you were a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And he said, no, Fred was teaching me how to be gay. In other words, Fred was giving me the opportunity to express my phallic stage of sexual awareness. Now, you see, out of that comes then a tolerance of paedophilia as a lifestyle. So this older man was not a paedophile. He was someone who was giving this little boy the opportunity to express his sexuality. Freud would say that was a good thing. Anything you want to say about that? Boy, it's a small class tonight, isn't it? And you're all sitting so far back. You're all afraid of the camera, aren't you?
I just notice a lot has to do with other people in this family and society, because the boys that tended to be way less innocent than me, I didn't know what they're going on about. They had older brothers and sisters and that, whereas I was, the only boy. So it's only years later looking back I can see that in primary school, they were talking about things that I didn't get. And my best friends, fortunately, he was the oldest in his family. So, but I know a lot of other friends probably, they were third or fourth boy down, so they picked up from the older brothers things that we didn't.
Probably like the story that you shared. If this man feels like, he was actually just showing me how to express, then he wouldn't feel bad helping other people express.
That's right.
They don't feel guilty because they're just helping out, these younger boys. That's pretty sad.
You see, and if some percentage of the population is born with a gay gene, then why shouldn't we expect to see that in Freud's phallic stage? You see, Freud was saying at ages 3 to 6, children are becoming sexually aware.
It's interesting what he said, that he trained me to be, because they say that's not the case, but he's kind of saying it is. I think you can train people to be homosexual. There might be a gene that predisposes people that way. So those people will be easier to train, but others that don't have that will still be easy to train if that's their first, with how they identify sexually.
So if we have sexual awareness by the child, 3 to 6, discovering of their Reynolds zones, you can see how a child aged 3 to 6, if they're a victim of sexual abuse, in this phallic stage, you can see how that the sexual abuse is going to stimulate the child sexually, and the child is able to respond to that stimulation without understanding it. The child doesn't have the maturity to understand what to do with sex, what to do with sexual awareness, what to do with sexual arousal. Yet even at that stage, you see, sexual abuse can leave the child in that very difficult state of feeling on one hand that they've been violated, but on the other hand feeling like, well, it was love of some kind that was coming from a parent or a step-parent or an older sibling. And so quite often you'll find with adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, there's an ambivalence there towards their abuser. Well, it was their way of expressing love to me, and there was a part of me that actually, my body responded to it. Well, Freud is saying here, Freud's drawing attention to that. He's drawing attention to that sexual reality of young children, and he's saying that this should be allowed to blossom and flower and to expression however the child wishes to express it. For instance, Margaret dealt with a situation recently in a preschool where she was called on to help because one of the preschool children had been acting out sexually. One of the little boys with one of the little girls. So now, Freud would say, well, what's the big deal? It's the phallic stage. See, it happens. And what tended to happen with Freud and the people who followed him, they tended to load a far greater degree of sexual maturity into that stage than that stage could handle. That they, rather than just seeing it simply as a stage of discovery, which parents shouldn't overreact to, rather they saw it as the stage of beginning of sexual maturing and of a sexual awareness and of a sexual identity.
Did Freud ever reveal his own childhood, anything to do with sex and all that in his growing up?
Well, I haven't read any biographies on Freud. I do know that as a counsellor, he'd have sex with his clients as part of the therapy, which Freudians who followed him later condemned. But this was, what we know about Freud is his social sexual. For him, everything is sexual. And so if the problems are sexual, the solutions are found in the sexual realm. Whereas we know from the scriptures that the problems are traced to the heart, not to the Reynolds zones, and it's to the heart that we must go.
That's interesting. He said that there was an unconscious drive to maximize pleasure, which
That's the id, yes. Now he's not saying that's true of children necessarily. That's a statement about the id.
okay.
But he's saying that the id begins to surface in the phallic stage, and it's the beginning. And a child's handling of their own sexual organs is, for Freud, the beginning of them seeking to maximise their own sexual pleasure.
So what is it stand for again?
Remember that diagram we had of Freud a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah, no doubt.
That little triangle? It'll change your life if you memorise it. Our society is Freudian.
Even like the concept that of children being egocentric. Just that. I mean, there's some truths that are based on our fallen state that sneak out in all these different stages. But it's interesting, just that in that early childhood state, that egocentric nature, they said of that period, but I'd say of humankind, is clear in the scriptures and is clear when people studied and observed.
Right. So Freud sought to put a non-judgmental label on a sinful activity.
Yeah,
because he didn't believe in sin, so he put his labels on sinful behaviour and called them something else.
They're starting this. He's assuming that the kids are innocent. It's sort of we, the adult, that corrupts their perfect innocent desire.
So as parents, what should our response be when our 3 to 6 year olds discover themselves in the bath? What should our response be? Touch not the unclean thing? What should our response be?
I think as parents you need to be wise, because if you start to draw attention to something, it can actually cause them to almost have this overemphasis on something that they need to worry about. So potentially, I would suggest to ignore it to start with would be a good response. And
Okay.
if it became a obsessive problem, and then to say something to gently kind of suggest that it's not a great thing to
Leave it alone. It might fall off. Something like that. You see, I've heard parents have said that to their kids, to their little boys. I think that's very wise. Start out just by ignoring it. You remember, Freud's observations, theories are based on observation. This does happen. Children at that stage do discover their own bodies, and they're interested in that, and so we can see it as a natural discovery of what is real and what is true. What we shouldn't do is simply draw conclusions straight away about the child's heart, that the child is sexually depraved or obsessed, and ignoring it, and there is a latency period of 6 to 12 where they'll tend to forget about it, so it all comes crashing back in adolescence. So what we can say is that it's too soon to panic. Now, the only caveat to that would be if you have reason to suspect abuse of some kind, and you pick that up, and the changes in the child's behaviours, we've dealt with that last term, and so within a family, for instance, here you have a 3 or 4 year old with older siblings, and you just don't be too naive. I mean, children do get up to things, and older children do abuse younger children, and to just keep an eye out for changes of behaviour. But generally speaking, it's something which at this stage we don't need to be too concerned about as the child discovers their own sexual reality. Okay, let's go to Erickson's psychosocial stage theory. And for the 0 to 18 months, he had basic trust versus mistrust. And remember, if one doesn't happen, the other will. Looking at this. If one doesn't happen, the other will. The infant's first social achievement then is his willingness to let the mother out of his sight without undue anxiety or rage, because she has become an inner certainty as well as an outer predictability. That's trust. That's the child developing basic trust, birth to 18 months. Now, if the basic trust is there, then 18 months to 3 years, the child will move to autonomy, rather than shame and doubt. So, for instance, to birth to 18 months, you say, for instance, if the mother abandons the baby or leaves the family, or the child is put up for adoption at birth and stays in the hospital, say, for a month or 2 months or 3 months before they're adopted out, see, that mistrust will develop. And the way it shows up is, how does the child handle it when the mother is out of the room? That's one way it shows up. And the baby's resultant basic trust of the environment will result in a healthy self-esteem and normal relating in later life. That's Erickson. In other words, they'll grow up trusting the people close to them. That brings us 18 months to 3 years. Autonomy versus shame and doubt. Muscular maturation, that's where the child's physically is beginning to grow and they're able to move around. They're able to crawl. That sets the stage for experimentation with 2 simultaneous sets of social modalities, holding on and letting go. So autonomy means that they can, in good ways, choose to hold on or let go in their social relations. To hold on can become a destructive and cruel retaining or restraining, or it can become a pattern of care to have and to hold. To let go, too, can turn into hostile letting loose of destructive forces, or it can become a relaxed to let pass and to let be. This is all quoting from Erickson. So trust from the first stage will allow autonomy to develop in this stage without adverse disruption. And it shows up in potty training, which is one of the first indications of a child's willingness to let go and let pass, an action over which the child has autonomy. So if there's basic trust, if, for instance, if the child can handle the mother stepping out of the room, basic trust, she's an inner certainty, even though she can't be seen, that will come, it'll show up when the potty training comes along. The potty training will be a breeze. See, that's the theory. And when it comes to potty training, because the basic trust is there, there'll be a willingness to let go and to let pass, to let be. A willingness to accede to the mother's wishes. See, that's a social engagement between the child and the mother now. It's Erickson, social engagement. And because the trust is there, there'll be a willingness to cooperate with the mother and in potty training to let go, rather than a holding on. As the first indications of an action of which the child has autonomy. And the result, according to Erickson, will be a willingness to let go and let be in their social relations. So when they get older and they're in social relationships, or even as young children playing together in a sandpit or something, and the child is playing with a toy, and another child comes along and takes the toy, will the first child be willing to let it go and let it pass? See, that's autonomy, where the child makes the decision, an autonomous decision of their own, to let it go and to let it pass. Or are they going to go the other way and hold on and refuse to let go? You see that? If there's a basic trust in their social relationships that's been developed with the mother, then they'll be more inclined to let it go and let it pass and share what they have, see, because there's trust. When they get older and they get into more mature relationships as preteens and as adolescents, again, she's not the most popular girl in school. Is she able to let it go and let it pass? He doesn't make it to the on the first 15. Is he able to let it go and let it pass? In other words, is there a basic trust there that's developed where they can trust the decisions of others, those in authority particularly? That brings us to Erickson's initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6. This is the stage of rapid learning through doing, trying, attempting, making. This is the preschool and the first 2 years of school. This is this stage here. Goals are contemplated and acts initiated. You see, initiative. In other words, this is where the child is to be given the freedom to initiate their own learning experience, their own learning environment. So in the preschool, in the first couple of years of school, the idea is that the teacher is not a teacher at all, but they're a facilitator or a coordinator of initiative learning. And so the child is then given the freedom to initiate and to set their own goals. So for instance, you might set up in the classroom, in the preschool classroom or the primary school classroom, you might set up a whole range of activities for the children to do. Here's painting, and here's Play-Doh, and here's building blocks, and here's something else. And the child comes in, and the coordinator, the initiative facilitator, who used to be called the teacher, stands back and says to the children, you choose what you would like to do. Now, the child that hangs back and is afraid to take the initiative is a child who shame and doubt and mistrust, you see, who hasn't learnt basic trust and autonomy, and now is able to take the initiative once he's given that freedom to do so. Or the child that rushes up and the things that he doesn't want to do, he throws on the floor so no one else can play with them, and he goes to the one activity he does want to do and won't let anyone else play with him. That's the other extreme of the same thing. So that's, instead of using their initiative, the child succumbs to guilt. Guilt because they're too fearful, because of their shame and their doubt and their basic mistrust, to move into their environment with a growing confidence. The child wants to help, wants to try, wants to do. This is risky for the child since they have almost no control over the outcomes. So you're baking a cake and your 4-year-old wants to help. They want to climb up on the stool and they want to help. Now, you know that you've only got a limited amount of time to bake this cake, and you know if you allow the 4-year-old to help, it's going to look like a bomb site by the time you're done. And it's going to take you twice as long to clean up the kitchen as it did to take you to bake the cake. What's happening here, this is a rapid stage of learning. The child wants to help, wants to try, and wants to do. And because you've done such a wonderful job of developing basic trust, birth to 18 months, such a wonderful job of encouraging autonomy, 18 to 3 years, now you reap the benefits at 3 to 6 when they want to take the initiative and help you in everything. And you're saying, oh, we need to get you off to school. You know, you're so ready to learn. You're so ready to go. You're into everything. Your parents say those things? The child has almost no control over the outcomes. So as they climb up on the stool to help mum bake the cake, you know, she gives them something to do, and the flour goes everywhere, and she gives them something else to do, and the ingredients fly everywhere, and they're wanting to stir. They see mum stirring the mixture, so they want to stir the mixture, and the bowl goes flying across the room, and the mixture goes everywhere. The child has no control over the outcomes. It's very risky for a child to take the initiative. Now, what's the mother going to do? Here's this child taking the initiative, getting into everything, and wrecking everything. Because the child has no understanding of the consequences of their initiative taking. They're just excited about taking the initiative. Now, if the mother disciplines the child, smacks the child, tells the child the naughty, sends the child away, sends the child into their room, in other words, she's separating the child from social interaction with her. And the punishment to the child is, you can't have social interaction with me because, well, whatever the because is, the child now goes away feeling guilty for having taken the initiative. Is this why our society is full of passive men, emasculated by their mothers, who refused to allow them to take the initiative and live with the consequences? Erickson would say, right on. You've nailed it. The child will also take risks in relationships, initiate a hug, crawling up into the lap, read me a story. If the child perceives him or herself to have failed in their efforts, then guilt over their attempting will set in, and a reluctance to try again. The child wants you to read them a story, and you're too busy, and you say, hopefully, in a kind and gentle voice, no, I'm too busy, I'll do it later. So the child goes away and has a little sulk, has a little pout, and now you're ready to read the story. So you say to the child, well, come on, I'll read you the story now. No, I don't want to. Nah. In other words, you've had your chance, buddy. You see, in other words, your initial refusal has come to a child who doesn't have the maturity to understand that your initial refusal isn't necessarily a refusal of them and of your desire to be socially engaged with them. They don't understand that. They don't have the maturity for that. And so as you say no to them, they're now filled with guilt for having made the request. The request has left them vulnerable, and their vulnerability has led to hurt. And as you see them pouting in the corner, you see, their wicked sinful hearts are pouting. They should accept with a cheerful and happy spirit that they can't have instant gratification, or something like that. You see, well, what they might be doing there in the corner is just trying to grapple with the fact that their acts of initiating social engagement have turned to custard, and so they're not going to try again. So when you offer it to them, I'm not going to take that risk again. Now, Erickson would say that guilt has come in because the initiative has been turned aside, and so now they're going to grow up beyond that into social interactions where they won't take the initiative. So we have all these young women so frustrated because the men around them won't take the initiative to date them and ask them to marry them and enter into a relationship. See, they're standing back, not moving. And Erickson would say, well, they've got to go all the way back to 3 to 6 years of age and 18 months to 3 years of age, where the shame and the doubt and the guilt came out of that basic mistrust. What do you think about that?
There's a lot of truth in it, but every kid's sort of different. The amount of rejection they'll take before they give up. Like, I gave up at school pretty early when I took initiative, but it was the wrong thing to do. Got spanked, and so I just can remember deciding in my little mind, that's it. I'll just do exactly what I'm told and never do any different.
How old were you then?
5.
And was this at school you were smacked?
Yeah.
Or at home?
No, at school. I thought it would look better done another way, and the teacher didn't agree.
So even at 5 years of age, you were able to make a little vow to yourself.
Yeah.
A vow.
Which was a bad thing to do, but. Yeah.
Well, whether it's good or bad, you made a vow,
Yep.
and for how long, for how many years was that vow in play before it began to be undone, or is it still in play?
Yeah, I'm just here doing exactly what you told me.
It's safe.
No,
it's safe.
It got me definitely right through into high school.
It got me through to the end of high school.
Well, no,
Survival. It worked. It worked.
Well, it didn't really work, but
it got you through. It sounds like
but
it worked.
the thing is, I think you forget about those things because you start doing it and it becomes how you do things. And you don't actually realise what you're doing after a while. Because everyone was like, well, Mum and Dad were like, why don't you make any effort? Like, you never get marks for effort. Because I just cruised through. But I guess that's why. I just wasn't interested. Too risky, maybe.
5 years of age. Isn't that amazing? You make a vow at 5 years of age, and all through those stages, that little vow continues. And it gets you through. So why would you give it up? It enables me to survive. I get through. Perhaps I don't meet everyone's expectations, but I meet my own.
Well, you stay safe, sort of. I guess that's what it was.
Safe.
Yeah, she was a scary teacher.
She wasn't around at high school, though.
No.
But the vow stayed in place.
Well, she went to church. Same church.
See, isn't it fascinating? Isn't it fascinating that I don't want to pick on Andrew necessarily, but he did give it away. He made a vow at 5 years of age, and it was still in place at the end of high school. That's what, 10 years? More? 12, 15 years? No, 10 years anyway. That vow was still in play and still active. And the thing is, it became such a natural part of the way he related and operated that he never thought of it again as kind of, well, this is a result of a vow when I was 5 years of age. This is just my personality. This is just the way I am. Erickson would say, no, it's not just the way it's not like being born with blue eyes. You made a vow when you're 5 years of age. You see, and the not trying will not change until the vow is repented of and reversed. Because the purpose of the vow was to keep you safe. You trusted the vow to keep you safe. You didn't trust Christ to keep you safe as you moved into your world of social interaction. Anyone else like to give up a childhood vow? Probably not now. You don't trust me. What do you think about Erickson's theories here for children? Psychosocial.
But I think he's got a point in that children can be encouraged to do things, and there's a development that can happen which is largely assisted by other people, particularly parents or teachers, having an input. So there is a developmental aspect that could be linked to, say, the word initiative. But what I query is to have the initiative as an opposite to guilt, because guilt is quite explained in the Bible, and it's not the opposite of initiative.
Well, remember, Erickson's not coming up with biblical understandings of these words.
That's why I'm saying something I agree with, and yet, I mean, there is an opposite of encouraging initiative and not encouraging initiative. Those are the opposites. But the guilt, I think, is a completely different subject. I think there's some.
What, from a biblical point of view, you say?
Biblical point of view.
Right.
For instance,
right.
My son stands on the bench, wanting to help, and I say, "You can't help today because there's knives. It's dangerous." And if he stands up there again, and he gets punished, and he gets told that it's too dangerous for you today at the moment because I'm making dinner and I've got all these big sharp knives out, and that you can. And other times I try and encourage him and get him to have a safe knife in a safe environment. You can chop the cat or something like a non-blunt knife.
So he is 3 years of age.
Yes.
Okay, so autonomy versus shame and doubt. Standing on the bench, trying to exercise some autonomy, Erickson would say your unwillingness to allow him to do that will result in either shame or doubt on his part.
See, I disagree.
Well, I understand. I think we all disagree with all of it. Sorry, I'm not asking you whether you agree or disagree with Erickson. We all disagree with him to some extent. We all agree with him to some extent. It's more just what I'm asking is, as we think about these characteristics, these categories of these stages, does it help us to understand our behaviour and the behaviour of our children? I'm not asking for a value judgment. I'm not asking you to say right or wrong. We understand this as a non-Christian making an observation of life and putting their own categories and understanding which fall far short of the wisdom of God. But what I'm asking is, do these theories, rather than critiquing the theories at the moment, do these theories help us to understand anything about people and therefore help us perhaps when it comes to helping families in distress?
Yeah, well, I think now, when Zeke comes in and I've just got home and I want to check my email or something and he wants up, it's so easy to expect the kid to understand me. But, I mean, that's ridiculous, really. But we do it all the time. Adults do it all the time. The kid is supposed to understand my world and what I'm about and what I want to achieve. Whereas he's just totally in the moment. The idea of, the whole future that it's coming, just wait thing, isn't really happening yet. So yeah, I'm just thinking, wow, I mean, it's pretty easy to exasperate your kids, like, that's definitely something I think to be a lot more aware of is how easy it is to put them on a path where they will not try and feel rejected.
So here's your child about to start preschool or about to start school for the first time. They're leaving the safety of the home environment and they're going into a classroom environment. And this is classic transitional stuff. So there's the mother with the child. First day of school or first day of preschool. And she's been talking to the child and trying to prepare him in his head and his heart for what's about to happen. And they get to the school, and what happens? The child sees all those kids, he sees mother about to leave, and what does he do? Or she?
Screams, pulls his eyes out, tries to grab him.
Won't let mother go, shrinks back from the classroom experience, hides his face or her face in mother's skirt, or trousers more likely, or the child goes, "Bye, mummy," and runs into the classroom full of excitement and anticipation of all the good things waiting for them. Now, Erickson would say those two different responses depend on basic trust, autonomy, and initiative being developed before they get to that classroom experience, before they get to that transition. The child that can't let the mother out of their sight as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old and can't move with initiative into their social engagement, but hangs back with shame or doubt or guilt or whatever word you want to use, mistrust, is a child that has missed out on their psychosocial development in those years they've spent at home with mother. Now, what often happens, you see, when a child acts like that on the first day of school, the mother might say, "Oh, you know, she's always been a shy child. She's shy." Or the teacher might say, "Look, it's okay, Mrs. Brown, this is very normal," and you know, the teacher tries to grab the child. Just let the child, you just go. The child will be okay, you know, and in a week's time they'll be fine. Mother goes, a week of this, you see, and so the mother's sitting in the car, bawling her eyes out, and the kid's inside the classroom, and in 10 minutes she texts the teacher, "How is he?" The teacher said, texts back, "He's fine." Whether the kid's fine or not, the text is, "He's fine," you see. Because why? On what basis is the teacher operating? The teacher's operating on the basis that if they can construct in the classroom an atmosphere of initiative and industry and autonomy, using Erickson's terms, this child is going to adjust and overcome all the deficits from their home and have those deficits made up in the classroom, and in a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks they'll be a happy and contented child, eager to go to school and eager to play. And you see how that goes? You see how the influence of these theories on our world? So what does the parent do? Well, keeps the children home and homeschools them. Well, Erickson would have a ball with that, wouldn't he? Psychosocial development. So he would say it's not that the child is shy or has a shy personality, but rather the child has missed out on basic trust, autonomy, initiative, and is filled with mistrust, shame, doubt, and guilt. Now he's making a lot of all those words: mistrust, shame, doubt, guilt. Those are all words that speak to the emotions, that speak to the state of a person's heart. They're not words that describe behaviour. They're not words that describe the outer person. They're words that describe the inner person. Now here we come back to Mark's objections. Mark is saying quite correctly that by labelling the child's heart with these terminologies, Erickson is missing the fact that there might be other things going on in the heart of the child, and that these labels may be incorrect labels to describe the heart of the child, because Erickson in his observations can't see the heart. He's making assumptions about the heart based on the child's behaviour. So what do you think about that?
Certainly the case. Like you can it's easy to generalize and simplify something into two categories. But then when you read the textbook and you go, oh, but my child is only doing this thing, therefore there's something wrong. But it could well be due to some completely different factor. And after a week, it's all fine again. For instance, my son generally hasn't had a problem with being left at preschool, but he had his tonsils out 3 weeks ago. And the first week he came back to preschool, he sort of wanted us to stay a bit longer. But he'd been in some discomfort at night, and there were different factors, lack of sleep, irritation, pain, that were, he wanted to have someone.
So that was a little bit out of the ordinary, wasn't it? The general pattern was different. And these are describing general patterns. See, I'm wondering if, for instance, Mark, when he's up on the bench there wanting to play, wanting to help, and you say, no, there's knives, Erickson would say, take the knives, let him stay, just take the knives away. Create a safe environment so he can stay there. Because he doesn't have the maturity to understand why you're sending him away. In other words, take the opportunity to build initiative and industry in the child. Reward that autonomy. Yes.
I've got a question now. Like the scenario of dropping your kid off the first day of school. Like if a healthy child is one that goes and plays and an unhealthy child is the child that is fearful or whatever. But in another situation, like you bring a kid to a circus, and some kids, their tendency, oh yay, all this stuff, and they go running off, but that's going into danger. Whereas the wise kid that has some, would stay to their parents and, oh, my parents are safe, I trust them. And so it's like, well, is that an appropriate definition of like trusting your parents? And
this is the difficulty, isn't it? When we have to allow for differences in children, which these theories don't really allow for, they tend to be a kind of stamp everyone the same. The differences in children, and as Mark said, the differences in the environmental factors from one day to the next.
Sometimes it's not or, it's either and, so it's a bit of both going on. Because in some areas, or with some relationships, maybe there's trust, but with other relationships, the kid has mistrust because it's learned. It's not going to be trusting of 100% people.
Taking a step back in some of these mental development of a child, I thought it was just incredible how much a child does learn at an early age. And it's just incredible from language to the different skills, to the different motor skills, fine and gross motor skills. And just their total interest in everything, and just sapping in names and vocabulary and
it's wonderful, isn't it?
Trying to imitate people. It's just an incredible process.
It is.
And just to be able to give God the glory.
Yes. That is definitely his. He created them for maturity, and he's overseeing that. Yes. Is that wonderful?
I think even as you look at initiative and children wanting to help and so forth, you can see, well, they are actually learning things when you do let them have go and stuff. But I just disagree with Erickson that there's such a detrimental effect that there's times where you can explain not today and for whatever reason, and it's still good for them to accept. So it's definitely good to encourage them because they do learn by having different experiences. I guess I disagree with. He's almost saying you have to always do that and you can never say no. And I think that's...
And maybe that's creating an overly sensitive child, because if you're always telling them yes, then the first time someone rejects them, they won't know what to do with it because they'll be so used to all the encouragement and everything.
You ever watch the auditions for American Idol? They travel around from city to city in America and they audition all these kids, and in these auditions you really get the impression these kids have never been told anything else other than they're wonderful in every way, shape and form. And so they're convinced they can sing, for instance. They never had a singing lesson in their life, so they get up and they sing, because they've been told all their lives, they're all this. So they get up and sing. And, old Simon or someone says, that was terrible. And the kid just can't believe it. No one's ever said that to them before. They honestly believe that they'd never hear those words. Well, see, it's children that have grown up under these theories of child raising, you see. And we have to know about the kind of society and culture that we're living in, because, you see, our children, even as children, are going to come up against these theories when they go to school. Even if they go to Christian school, if they're homeschooled, they're going to encounter these in the children that they play with in the neighbourhood. Or, you see, you can't, unless you keep them, keep them away from non-Christian children or children raised in a non-secular environment. The reality is that at some point, perhaps not at these early years, but at some point they're going to encounter a world in which children have been raised along the lines of these theories. Now, as one who seeks to be a pastoral counsellor, you see, you're going to be involved with families who and the parents will be very confused, because here's these theories out here, and here's the Christian idea, and here's, for instance, you're not allowed to smack, and the Bible says you smack, and so what do the parents do? There's confusion, and they'll come to you as the counsellor. What do you think we should do? My child he just won't play with anybody. He just wants to stay at home all the time and just be by himself. Is there something wrong with my child? Should I be concerned? Well, the parent's concern comes to some measure because of these ideas that are out there in society and the expectations on their child to move through these stages with basic trust, autonomy, initiative and industry, identity. So it's going to help you to understand where they're coming from. It's going to help you understand the cultural milieu in which they are coming to you from for pastoral care. And after the counsel relationship comes to an end, this is the milieu they're going to go back into. So you're going to have some understanding of what it is that they're immersed in, so that your care, while it's biblical and Christ-honouring, is also going to be a care that's very much aware of what they've come out of and what they're going to go back into after they've finished with you. Does that make sense?
I think this can be good, some of this, just thinking through situations, because we're all a product of our family culture, and to actually put your family's culture you inherited under the microscope a bit more, and because it's not all godly. We just think it's right because that's what we know. So it can be good.
That's very interesting, Andrew. That's an interesting take on it. You see, maybe looking at these theories should cause us to reflect a little bit on our own upbringing and what we were like as kids and the kind of family environment we grew up in. Not in order to necessarily make anybody responsible, but in order just to understand what's true about us. Here's a child who grew up as an only child. Here's a child who grew up in a large family. Well, that's interesting. I wonder what differences arise in these children as a result of just simply that, simple difference. You see, well, how would you begin to ask those questions? Where would you begin to look for that? And you can say, oh, well, the Bible doesn't address those issues. Well, the Bible does say that the sins of the fathers are carried on into the children, that there is an effect that upbringing has on children. That's why the Bible has so much to say about parenting and care for children, because the way children are raised does impact on their subsequent years. My parenting will have a significant impact on my children throughout their life. It won't determine, only God determines, but it will have an impact. It may be an opportunity for thinking about your relationship with your parents as adults. You think about your relationship with your parents, you think about what's happened in the past. You think about what needs to be resolved. You think about the things you'd like to talk to your parents about but never have. You think about incidences that happened when you were young that you've always wondered about and talked about. You see, because now you're beginning to realise that your life just doesn't begin now and go on for tomorrow and the next day, but in fact everything that happened in the past contributes to where you are in the present and contributes to how you will face everything in the future. And if what these theories can do is give you some categories by which to go back and evaluate the past and look at the past and bring it into subjection to a biblical understanding. So if the sins of the fathers are passed on, well, what sins did my father commit against me, either omission or commission? What did he do or what did he not do that he should have done or should have not done? And how has that affected me as an adult? How has that affected me in my later life? It'd just be good to know that, wouldn't it? If that's what's true, then wouldn't that be good to know?
So that you don't have to pass them on.
Yes, you can break the cycle, but also that's very true. That self-understanding will help you to live differently. But what's more important is that self-understanding will help you to understand another in the counselling relationship.
Including drastically different culture or...
Yes, culture, environment. Yes, very different environment. For instance, here's a man who's, say, I don't know, in his 30s or 40s, married with a young family, grown family, and his wife is totally frustrated at his passivity, and they're sitting there in front of you, and male passivity. What do you do with male passivity? Well, why is male passivity there? God created a man to move with confidence and strength into his world, and male passivity, they hold back and they shrink back. Now, as a counsellor, what are you going to do with that? You can see the very negative effects his passivity is having on his marriage and on his children, on his home life, as he refuses to move towards his wife, towards his kids, in his church he refuses to move into ministry. What's holding him back? Now, as you ask him the questions, he probably has no idea. He will tell you perhaps he's always been like this. He will tell you this is his personality. He will tell you it's never been a problem before until my wife started complaining about it. You see, what are you going to do with that? Well, the answer lies somewhere back here in the past. His commitment to passivity is a commitment that was made somewhere back here in the past. So you ask him questions about his relationship with his father and his upbringing, and immediately say, why are you asking me these questions about my past? Aren't we supposed to forget everything that lies behind and move on? Why are you asking about my past? Well, whatever happened in your past is impacting on your present and will have an impact on how you face your future. So yes, you're quite right. These theories do get us thinking about our life from birth right through. See, just looking at that page there, and you say, well, I'm down here at the bottom, see, 60 and beyond. So I'm down here. But see, you're somewhere up here, about halfway. And so if you look at that page, you say, I'm wherever I say I'm halfway, well, that means there's some things that have already happened and there's some things that are about to happen. Even that's a huge perspective. That itself could change a lot of things. Well, let's take a break now before we go on to cognitive development and Kohlberg's theory of moral development. Development. Ages 2 to 7 is the pre-operational stage. Here we see the beginnings. Now, you can imagine that operational would be where things are just flowing along nicely. Pre-operational is the beginnings, the hesitant, stumbling beginnings. The beginnings of spoken language, first by mimicking, then as they begin to internalize concepts about objects and develop relationships and feelings about other people. So they begin by mimicking in their language, Then they begin to internalize concepts about objects. So they can, for instance, they can know that they have a cuddly to go to bed with at night, and if it's not there in the room, they cry or they complain or they ask for it. You see, they're able to conceptualize an object. In other words, they just not just aware of it when they see it, they're aware of it when they don't see it. They develop relationships and feelings about other people. They begin to make their likes and dislikes known. At this stage, we see the child as egocentric, a Freudian term. The child cannot yet view the world from the viewpoint of someone else and hence feels responsible for what happens, e.g. parents break up, sexual abuse, and so on. At the 2 to 7, that's where a child feels like their parents broke up or dad left because of me, because I was a naughty boy. That's what they mean by egocentric. Not so much necessarily that their behaviour is naughty or antisocial, but rather that the child is at a stage where they really do think that the world began when they were born and the world does revolve around them. So if dad left, it must be because of me. They're not able to conceive or to think or to conceptualise that there may be something else going on apart from them in the lives of other people that they're not taken up with or concerned with. It's not concerned about them.
I think it's coming too big a number of years for that.
And also sexual abuse, a child will often feel like they're responsible, and hence it could be 40, 50 years of age before they begin to move away from that. I can remember as a child the first time I realised that my parents could have a conversation with other adults and not be talking about me.
Sorry.
I'm not surprised.
So I remember my mother took me with her. She went to visit a friend. I must have been about 5, I guess, 5 or 6. And I was playing in the other room, and or maybe in the same room, I don't know, but they were talking. You know when adults talk? You know when little kids you try to talk like an adult and you don't understand adult talk, so you just talk a lot of mumbo jumbo thinking it's adult talk. And so they were just, talking, and I wasn't listening to them. And then we got on the car to go home, and I said to my mother, were you talking about me? She said no, and I was devastated. It's not funny that I was devastated.
No.
Because you see, it was just now Freud or Erikson will say that's egocentric in terms of social relationships. That's an egocentricity that the world is all about the child. The child cannot view the world from someone else's viewpoint. This is egocentricity. The child cannot yet view the world from the viewpoint of someone else. Now we would disagree with that. That we can actually train and teach a child to view the world with consideration for other people. See, this is 2 to 7. Well, that includes preschool years. That includes the first 2 or 3 years of primary school. Children can be taught to socialise. They can be taught to think about the welfare of others. But see, remember Freud, ego. You see, these latent desires are pushing up, pushing up, pushing up, pushing up, and it's useless to try to suppress them. You just got to let them go. Well, we would say, no, you train up a child in the way they ought to go, and that means socially as well. They can be taught. Now, see, Piaget would say because of this egocentricity in a child's cognitive development, they have to be allowed to explore their world as egocentric beings. We can't expect them to all sit in a nice row and all be taught multiplication tables and all be taught to do the same thing. Everyone pick up their pencils, everyone draw letter A. See, and Piaget, being a good Freudian, would say no, the egocentricity id is pushing out, wanting to express itself, and they're being forced now to just, along with everyone else, pick up their pencil and draw letter A, and this is damaging to the child's psyche. The child must be allowed to explore and express their initiative and learn through their own discovery. See how that goes? We would say no, the Bible requires us to teach our children, expects us to teach our children, expects our children to learn, expects our children to lives to be influenced by that learning. A lot of the educational theory behind preschool and primary school today in New Zealand is driven by Piaget's theory of cognitive development, the pre-operational stage. Because it's pre-operational, then we cannot expect serious learning to begin in the ages 2 to 7. So that's why, at high school age we have these huge reading recovery programs. Kohlberg's theory of moral development, we did that last week, pre-conventional morality, level 1, 3 to 6. So I won't go through that again. Evaluation. This is an evaluation of all these theories, not just Kohlberg. As we would expect, all these approaches do not view the child as God does. The child has dignity as an image bearer, that should be image bearer, and depravity as a fallen creature. Both dignity and depravity. In other words, you see, these theories do not account for creation or the fall. Now, remember, we talked about this, didn't we? Creation, fall, redemption, glory. And these theories are concerned only with this. And this here, we're not image bearers and we're not fallen. We're not creatures and we're not fallen. They deny our creatureliness and they deny our fallenness. So for the child, they deny the child's creatureliness, image bearer, and they deny the child's fallenness. Now, this is what gives the child dignity, and this is what gives the child depravity. You see, and redemption is a redemption of the depravity, and the glory is a glorification of the dignity. Now, if you deny the creatureliness and the fallenness of a child, then you have to come up with another explanation for what you see, what you observe. And these theories are that alternative explanation. Now, the scriptures hold to both the dignity and the depravity of people, including children, and the gospel deals with both dignity and depravity. The gospel appeal, invitation, is to image bearers who have the sense of deity within them. The unbeliever has suppressed, but it's still there, the truth about God. There's their dignity. The gospel appeals to what is suppressed. The gospel also appeals to the fact that it is suppressed, their sin. See, the gospel deals with both. Now here's the thing, you see, these secular theories deal with either one or the other. These secular theories either focus in on the depravity or the dignity. Now, if you look at Erickson's list there, see, you can see already his trying to work with the dignity and the depravity without using those terms. Basic trust and mistrust. See, dignity, depravity, autonomy, shame and doubt. Initiative versus guilt. He's trying to account for both the dignity and the depravity. He's trying to account for the fact that the children can be a lot better than what he sees them to be, and he's trying to account for what he sees them to be. And he's trying to figure out, how can we help these children to be better than what we see them to be? And he puts labels on what that better looks like. So he's trying to work with dignity and depravity while at the same time deny creatureliness and fallenness. Now, to the extent he sees dignity and depravity, to that extent it's helpful. To the extent that he denies creatureliness and fallenness, to that extent it's not helpful. The secular theories often seem to engage only in a distortion of one or the other. We need a counselling approach to children that affirms their dignity and deals realistically with their depravity. As sinners react sinfully to being sinned against. As sinners, they react sinfully to being sinned against. Now, I realise that's not a hugely extensive evaluation, but we're doing little bits of evaluation as we go along here. Okay, anything else you'd like to say regarding the evaluation of these theories at the early childhood stage?
Well, that pre-operational stage of PJ's one. Yeah, I mean, it might be, I think kids are different, but I can remember when I was 5 at school, sitting down on the playground one day and just sitting down and watching all my friends and just wondering, I wonder what it's like to see the world through John's eyes. Like, what does he see running around and what does he feel? You know? And I was like, whoa.
How old would you have been?
Yeah, I was 5. Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
So that's...
So you can remember thinking about what it would be like seeing it from their point of view.
Well, and that, I was thinking pretty hard about that for a week or so. And obviously didn't worry about it too much after that. No, but I do definitely remember really sitting there and thinking, wow, people don't see the world the way I do.
Isn't that interesting? Yes. Well, Piaget wouldn't have an answer for that, would he?
I got it from Dad probably because he was good at seeing the world from other people's viewpoint.
But I think
Pretty good.
reading Berger's description of Piaget, I think a lot of his observations are very true. He's able to, he not only has this big broad spectrum of 2 to 7, but he does actually break it down year by year, and I guess particularly the ones regarding 3-year-olds, some of his observations were startling true.
Of your 2-year-old.
Or 3-year-olds, yeah. Like he used the term centration, saying that if they're so focused on a particular truth, they find it very difficult for something else to be true as well. So a couple of weeks ago in this conversation, he says, "No, it's a puppy." And I said, "It's a dog." He said, "No, it's a puppy." And he insisted that it wasn't a dog. And Piaget said that no, it's something in the way that they think is that they are growing, they're developing, and at that age they're starting to have this concept of different items, and they generally can't take the concept of something being 2 things at once. And I think here's a number of observations that I
Okay.
much agree with. Like even his he calls it irreversibility. So kid throws a tantrum because you've added something to his meal, like a piece of lettuce on a hamburger, and because in their mind you've totally changed it. It can't be reversed. For you, not just a piece of lettuce, so you take that off. But for the child, it is the end of the world, and they throw a tantrum or whatever. You sneak the hamburger out, you take off the lettuce, you go, "Oh, I've got another hamburger here," and you go, "Oh, no, there's no lettuce, it's all fine." So it's
Fascinating, isn't it?
it's quite fascinating how
Mm.
the way their mind does work, even from the way that Piaget has observed things, is quite quite true.
And a lot of that is wisdom, isn't it? Actually understanding that is a problem for that age of a person and not trying to push them to do things they're not ready to do.
Well, see, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, some parent might smack the child for not eating a hamburger with a lettuce on it and see it as blatant rebellion and disobedience. But now you guys are saying, no, hold on. A wise approach is to understand, as Piaget would tell us, you know, what you did. Take the hamburger away and bring it back without the lettuce. Hey, new hamburger.
So yeah, I think it's important to be tolerant with children. I think,
But to understand them.
and to truly understand them.
Yes.
That's what Christian theories aren't very good at. I think the secular theories, they started with the wrong facts. They've missed out the fallen, and they've missed out image bearers.
Yes.
And so when they tried to understand them, they've come up with all these crazy things, as well as some quite
When they try to explain it, yeah.
distinctly truthful observations. But as Christians, often we start with those, we hold on to, they're images of God and they're depraved. And we forget to actually properly observe them and properly try to understand them. And we kind of, there's something we're actually missing. We think we're holding on to the truth because we're disciplining them and we're making them responsible. But actually, we need to be a bit wiser.
Mercy triumphs over judgment. I think we're very quick to judge, not be merciful or love the whole the whole spectrum of love is not just truth. It's love contains a lot of things.
Because I think what they haven't allowed for is sin in all these different developmental stages, and we quite clearly see the deprivation coming through in different ways. But it's making sure that we target the sin and we give tolerance and show love at the same time.
See, isn't it interesting, in Erickson's stage age, the 8 stages of man, failure at each one of those stages for Erickson is always the fault of the environment. See, if the child has shame and doubt and guilt and inferiority, well, the very labels themselves suggest that the fault is not the child's. It's bad parenting or something. So, Mark's quite right. If you deny the fallenness of the child, then you're going to end up with a distortion of the truth. Now, we have to take the distorted truths of these theories and rework them through the scriptures and make them useful for us in Body of Christ ministry. Well, what I'd like to do now is talk about counselling children. And I've got some handouts here. I don't know if Richard wants all this stuff, but I've done copies for him. Now this is a chapter out of a book, the Play Therapy Primer, and this is that therapy with children is based on play rather than on speaking like you would with an adult. You spend an hour talking. With children, that probably doesn't work. And so this is chapter 4, the theoretical underpinnings of play therapy. And you'll notice that as you go through this, that you come to the developmental concept for the practice of play therapy, level 1 children. This is on page, unfortunately the page numbers haven't come out, so if you're turning the pages from the title page, 1, 2, 3, 4, turn over 4 pages, and you come to the developmental context for the practice of play therapy. Level 1 children. From birth to the age of about 2, children's primary task is to learn to respond to the environment with pleasure, and in counterpoint they fear abandonment and deprivation by others. And then you see this cognitive development in level 1 children, physical development, emotional development, social development, play development, processing of life experience. And then you go to level 2 children and you start again. From the age of 2 till about age of 6, children's primary task is to learn to respond to the environment with success, and in counterpoint they fear personal and extreme punishment by other powerful forces. So, not supposed to punish them. So, cognitive development again, emotional development, and social development, play development, processing life experience, and then level 3 children. Now, you see what they've done? They've gone to each of the theorists of social development and so on, cognitive development. So, my lectures have sought to give you a little introduction to those therapists so that you can read this sort of thing and understand what they're talking about and gain some profit from it. And out of the theoretical underpinnings of play therapy, you can begin to develop your own approach to counselling children. Okay, so that's the theoretical one. Let me just try another one here. This is a primer on play therapy. Oops, is there one there or 2? There we go. This is just a very brief one-page summary of play therapy. And it's based on Carl Rogers' non-directive therapy of counselling, which is a very client-centred approach. where the counsellor at all times maintains a warm regard, I think is the term Rogers used, a warm regard at all times for the client. So it's very client-centered, very non-directive. And the idea behind play therapy is the Carl Rogers approach is the ideal approach for children. Now, there's a lot of problems with the Carl Rogers approach, but here's how it's been applied to children. The need for an alternative to talk therapy. That's why we're talking about play therapy rather than talk therapy. This is a primer on play therapy we're looking at. The need for an alternative to talk therapy. Children often haven't developed the detailed language and abstract thought skills necessary to verbalise feelings, thoughts and behaviours. But often in play therapy, you can their feelings, thoughts and behaviours will surface. The function of play therapy, play as expression. The goal is to allow the child to speak metaphorically with toys and play. This is, you will be aware, and when you're talking with children who have been victims of sexual abuse, you'll use atomically appropriate toys to help the child show you what went on, because they can't talk about it. When Margaret was in the States, she worked for a year in a child advocacy centre in St. Louis, and the youngest client she had was 3 years of age. And she met with them every week, and they used play therapy. And in the course of the play therapy, she learnt much of what had gone on with that child's sexual abuse, information which was later used in court to convict the abuser. Landreth's 10 tenets for relating to children. Now if you go turn over 1, 2, you come to the 10 tenets for relating to children by Gary Landreth. Children are not miniature adults, and the therapist does not respond to them as if they were. Now this brings out the point that Andrew made earlier, that his little boy can't understand Andrew's, when he comes home from work, that Andrew's tired and Andrew needs this and Andrew needs that, he needs cuddles from his wife and yada yada yada. He doesn't understand all that, he just wants daddy. So children are not miniature adults. We can't expect them to understand adult emotions. Children are people, they're capable of experiencing deep emotional pain and joy. They have emotional memory. Children are unique and worthy of respect. The therapist prizes the uniqueness of each child and respects the persons they are. See, that's dignity. Children are resilient. Children possess tremendous capacity to overcome obstacles and circumstances in their life. Now remember, all these tenets are based on observation. They're not based on understanding image bearing or fallenness. I personally don't think number 4 is true. I don't think children are resilient. I think children can be severely damaged. What they learn to do is to hide their damage. They learn to conform to their environment and to what's expected of them by their more powerful caregivers. They have emotional memory. The hurt remains. A trauma that's not comforted is a trauma that remains. It's not that they're resilient, it's just that they've learnt to survive. Often number 4 is used to, when parents are divorcing and their children are 4, 5, 6 years of age, people say, what about the kids? And the divorcing parents will say, oh, well, you know, kids are tough. They'll get over it. That's where number 4 comes in. It's not true. Children, there's a lot of non-Christian research now being done on the effects of divorce on children, whereas for many years we thought the children were largely unaffected. Now we're seeing, in fact, there's a huge legacy left in their lives as adults. Children have an inherent tendency towards growth and maturity. They possess an inner intuitive wisdom. Well, I don't know about inner intuitive wisdom, but certainly under God's economy they were born for maturity. So no surprises there. Children are capable of positive self-direction. They're capable of dealing with their world in creative ways. They certainly deal with their world in creative ways, but it's not always positive. Children's natural language is play and is the medium of self-expression with which they are most comfortable. Certainly that would be true. Children play all the time. Children, in their play, children go into imaginary worlds, and their play they can create parallel universes in which they spend their lives, and they imagine they're all kinds of wonderful creatures and do wonderful things. Children have the right to remain silent. The therapist respects the child's decision not to talk. Now, that's if you're in a counselling situation, that's very important. Just like any other client you might have. Children will, in other words, they don't have to answer any question that they're asked. their silence is to be respected and not judged for it. Remember that story I told you, months ago now, about that Paul Tripp's client that came in and sat with her back to him on the floor and said nothing? The right to remain silent. And because he was able to maintain a non-anxious presence in the face of her silence, that itself was wonderfully therapeutic and healing for that girl, to the point where she was able to talk to him. She trusted him. It was a safe place. So not only do they have a right to remain silent, not only does the therapist respect the child's decision not to talk, but the therapist will view the silences as a vitally important aspect of the therapy. By maintaining a non-anxious presence, they will begin to create a safe environment for a child that's too scared to talk. Children will take the therapist's experience to where they need to be. The therapist does not attempt to determine when or how the child should play. The child's growth cannot be speeded up. The therapist recognises this and is patient with the child's developmental processes. Well, we would say that God, not us, is in control of the speed at which a child grows up. And while parents or therapists may wish for their child to act and behave in a more grown-up manner, and they might heave a sigh and say, I can't wait for you to grow up, or why can't you grow up? And the child says, well, Mummy, I'm just a kid. You see? Okay, back to the first page. E. Landreth's 8 basic principles, see attached. Okay, that's over the first page. 8 basic principles of child-centered play therapy. The therapist is genuinely interested in the child and develops a warm, caring relationship. The therapist experiences unqualified acceptance of the child and does not wish the child were different in some way. The therapist creates a feeling of safety and permissiveness in the relationship. The child feels free to explore and express itself completely. That permissiveness there is not a negative permissiveness. It's a positive permissiveness that goes with the idea of safety. See, someone who feels safe is someone who will dance as if no one is watching. That kind of permissiveness. The therapist is always sensitive to the child's feelings and gently reflects those feelings in such a manner that the child develops self-understanding. So say the child is crying, and see, number 4 is not much different to what you do with an adult. And you might say to the child, you seem to be sad. I'm very sorry that you're sad. And that might be all you say. You see, you're gently reflecting back the child's feelings of sadness, and the child develops a self-understanding. Oh, well, yes, I am sad. And they're able to put a word to it now. Put a word to what they're feeling. I'm feeling sad. The therapist believes deeply in the child's capacity to act responsibly, unwaveringly respects the child's ability to solve personal problems, allows the child to do so. Wow, that's asking a lot, isn't it? The therapist trusts the child's inner direction, allows the child to lead in all areas of the relationship, and resists any urge to direct the child's play or conversation. So what you do is you leave the child to play, and the child's playing in the room, and you're sitting there and you're observing the child at play. And you might put some playthings out there. Margaret has a sandbox in her room, and she has little toys and figurines and that the child can take into the sandbox and do things with it. And there's no attempt to direct the child's play. It's not so much that she trusts the child's in a direction, like it says here in number 6. That's a bit much. Rather that by allowing the child to play in a safe environment, it may well be that some things will surface as she observes the child and can gently reflect back to the child what she observes. The therapist appreciates the gradual nature of the therapeutic process, doesn't attempt to hurry the process. Well, that applies to any counselling situation. The therapist establishes only those therapeutic limits which help the child accept personal appropriate relational responsibility. That again would depend a lot on the age of the child. Okay, coming back to the first page, E. If the therapist wants to heal the wounded child, they must enter the child's world rather than forcing the child to enter theirs. Now, that's why play therapy is you are entering into the child's world. Talk therapy is what you do with adults. And talk therapy is where the adult counsellor and the adult seeker enter into each other's world by way of talking. You enter into the seeker's world through talk of the adult. Now, with a child, play is to enable you to enter into their world by way of play therapy, because they haven't got the maturity to talk with you the way an adult does. Non-directive approach enhances the child's sense of control over the environment, important when history, e.g. abuse, has limited their sense of control in their environment. Margaret had a situation once where she was, parents came to her and asked her to counsel their 2 children. Now, their 2 children were both primary school age. And so Margaret saw these children one time, and the 2 children came in, and the mother dropped them off, I think, or waited, I can't remember. But anyway, she was in the room with the 2 children, just the 3 of them. And the children talked very freely and very happily about the situation in their lives. Now, they're a bit older than what the age range we're dealing with tonight, a little bit older. Now, during the week, the parent called Margaret up and said, I want to sit in next time. And Margaret said, well, why is that? And the parent said, because the children won't tell me what you talked about. And Margaret tried to explain, well, that's the way counselling works. There's confidentiality. They don't have to. And eventually, the parent prevailed on Margaret, and Margaret went to her supervisor. And because the children were so young, the parent did have some kind of legal rights. And so the next time the parent sat in, and it was very different. The children weren't talking at all. They clammed up, even though the parent said nothing, just sat there and said nothing. Now, you see what's going on here? On one hand, we have the reality that the children need an environment where they feel safe and they have the freedom, but like they're talking about there, to be able to talk. On the other hand, the parent feels very strongly the parental right and authority to know what's going on in the child's life, to know what the child is talking about, to know what the child is saying. So they can help the child, so they can understand the child, so they can defend themselves against the child, whatever the motive. The parent felt that they had to be involved, that it wasn't right that the children were talking about the parents behind the parents' back to a stranger. Well, there's 2 different sets of values operating there. One is the value of the counsel along the lines that we're looking at here, and the other is the value of the parent. So I kind of went along this for a few sessions with the parents, and finally Margaret had to just terminate the counselling because it wasn't working. And because she was very aware that if it's not working for the children, it's not working. It might be working for the parent, but that's not the point. It's got to be working for the children. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you can understand the parents' reluctance or their fear, but then I guess the deeper issue is, I can understand why they're afraid, is why are they feeling afraid? And that's another whole issue, which might come, the kids might bring that out, why the parent would be afraid, or else,
So
counselling the parent as well might help.
So what would you do in that situation? You try to counsel the parent on their own? Or the parents has brought the children for counselling? It's pretty obvious there's a whole lot going on there in terms of family. You might get the family together, have a family conference. Basically, the Margaret needed to develop a trust relationship with the parents so they would trust her with their children. Maybe a family conference would help there. But those are the sort of things you run into when you're counselling with children. Additional age-appropriate cognitive behavioural elements. Well, if you're into cognitive behavioural therapy, there'll be cognitive processing and behavioural interventions. Tools for play therapy. Toys, various possibilities, dolls, sand play, and Margaret has a mixture of A, B and C, and drawing. Actually, drawing works very well, not just with children, but with adults as well, particularly adults who struggle to express perhaps some very painful emotions. That's a primer on play therapy. Let me just hand out something else here. Now this one is not using play so much as using art and drawing. So it lets the sad out, using children's art to express emotions. Several years ago, an exhibit of children's artwork, which was being displayed in the rotunda of the National Capitol building, was covered by one of Television Network's Donna Shalala, Secretary of Health and Human Services, was shown viewing the artwork and stopping to visit with the young artists, each of whom either had AIDS or had tested positive for HIV. One of the children with whom she stopped to talk was a little girl about 5 or 6. Shalala asked the child if she'd like to do her artwork. The girl answered very emphatically in the affirmative. Shalala asked her why, and the girl responded, "It lets the sad out." These few words convey a profound message for everyone who works with young children. For all children have sadness that needs to be let out, whether they are afflicted with a disease, are victims of verbal, physical or sexual abuse, have lost a parent to death or divorce, live in poverty, frequently witness violence, or merely experience normal childhood fears like nightmares and things. Children are seldom prepared to cope with such traumatic events. Consequently, they'll often end up feeling helpless, anxious and fearful. So this is a communicating without words and how art can help. So this is a very interesting article and about how to help children draw. Now, you don't have to wait until you're counselling children. You can do this with your own children. Play therapy and artwork. Now, just go back to this one again. A primer on play therapy. And there's the last 2 sheets there, which probably should be attached to this other one on art therapy. See Christopher Shield, and over the page Judy Shield. Just look at Christopher Shield for a minute. Here's how artwork can work. So Christopher is asked to design his own shield, and he's asked to divide his shield into 4 sections, and you provide for Christopher the headings. In the Children's Centre, now the Children's Centre was like a counselling centre for children, which he would come and do his play therapy and his art therapy. And then, so one section is for the Children's Centre, one section is for home, things that need to change, things the family needs to change. So at the Children's Centre, these are some of the things that Arthur said. I found friends, talked about why it was rubbish at home. We all know what the rules are. You get told off, but it's fair. Talked about mum, things to do. Now this is an older child, one who has writing skills and able to use words. What was it like at home compared to the Child Centre? Everyone had forgotten about our mum. I felt left out. Dad never talked to me. I was bored. I annoyed Anna because she was spoilt. Went out on my own. Okay, already what do you know about Christopher? Just from those 2.
He cares about his mum. Like he's noticed someone else being ignored or dead.
Okay. What else? What else do you think?
He's confused when he's at home because he doesn't know that the rules change.
More
Not
comfortable
consistency.
at the centre than at home.
Pardon?
He's more comfortable at the centre. Or
He is.
positive about the view towards it than at home.
So the centre is doing some things for him that the home is not doing. What would be some words that might describe what the centre is doing that the home's not doing?
Consistency.
Engagement.
Engagement. Dad never talked to me. Engagement. At the Children's Centre we talked about mum. At home, everyone had forgotten about our mum. What do you think's happened?
Maybe she's left.
Avoided things.
She's either died or she's gone. Left. See, and the home is struggling with mother's absence. Dad's not talking, he's gone all silent, and I felt left out, kids have been left out, there's no comfort, no engagement. Whereas in the centre they're able to talk about mum, be engaged. Now, you see, Christopher hasn't told you all that, You've just learnt all that by looking at a shield. Things I need to change. Learn to accept family rules. Tell people how I feel, especially Dad. See that Anna's really only a baby, so don't use her to get my own back. Now see what's doing the Children's Centre is helping Christopher to think about, in that third quadrant, how to change things at home. What he can do, empower him, use his autonomy to move into the home and begin to make some changes himself. It will change things at home. If he learns to accept the rules and he talks to Dad about how he feels and he treats his little sister better, things are going to change for him. Things the family needs to change. Dad and others will talk about Mum, look at pictures of her and so on. That suggests she might have died, doesn't it? Dad to spend time with me, going out and do things, have friends and have proper pocket money. This kid's probably about 11 or 12. Family to have a cosy evening once a week. That's pretty cute, isn't it? A cosy evening. See how much we learn about Christopher and his environment from that.
Yeah, he's not very resilient. Things don't change.
Just look at the therapeutic approach there. What's it like for you, Christopher, here in the Children's Centre? And what's it like at home? Let's talk about those differences, Christopher. And so Christopher talks about the difference. You see, Christopher's coming self-aware now. He's now got something to compare the home with. If he grows up in the home, that's all he's ever known. He's not able to talk about it, not able to reflect on it. Now, in the Children's Centre, he's taken a step out of the home. He's now able to compare this experience with that experience, and he's able to say some things about how he needs to change and about how the family needs to change. See, Christopher is now becoming a factor in his own environment instead of a non-entity. Let's go over the page to Judy's shield. Now, Judy looks like she's probably 12 or 13. And she has divided her shield up into the things that I love, things I don't like, things that describe me, and things that describe my feelings. Things that she loves. She loves Pip, her dog. She loves her dad, but she hates him too. And she's pretty enamoured with that pop star. This is me. Mini skirt, kissable lips, lock of my hair. She's obviously done well in swimming. Hair from Zinc My Pony. Pills overdosed twice. Me now beautiful. Me now beautiful. Okay, what do you know about Judy already?
She's not sure if she's really beautiful or not. Like, she's thinks she is, and then she thinks she's not. Like this shite thing there.
Well, her assessment is based on very physical things, and
Well, rather than making an evaluation, just tell me the facts. What are you learning about her situation, her environment? So you're a counsellor, and you're looking for things in which you can begin to talk to her about. What are you learning about her?
She likes animals, her pony and her dog.
What about the pills?
Yeah,
She's overdosed twice. Shouldn't that stick out? Shouldn't that hit you in the face, counsellor? She's overdosed twice. Woo! That'd be a presenting problem, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's a cry for help.
Well, you don't know that. You do know she's overdosed twice. Isn't that significant? She's told you that, along with a whole lot of other stuff. You see how she's expressed it? Now, for you, that sticks out like a neon light flashing. For her, it's just, this is me. This is just in with everything else. In other words, it's not that big a deal, perhaps. Now, if she's overdosed, then there's something going on that she feels about herself. Why would she want to kill herself or try to kill herself? It may be a cry for help. It may be just intense self-contempt. It may be that she really does believe that she and everyone else would be better off if she wasn't around. You don't know all that. Don't know all that till you start asking some questions. But you see, you see how she's trying to come to terms with her sexuality, and yet she's overdosing. And what about her hatred of her father? What's that related to? Well, we don't know. See, we don't know till we ask some questions. But you see, you're beginning to get a way forward with Judy. You're beginning to pick up on some things that you can begin to talk to her about. And so you'll want to talk to her about her relationship with her father. She loves her dad, but she hates him. What's that? That's ambivalence. What is ambivalence often a pointer to? Sexual abuse. Sexual abuse victims become very ambivalent about their own sexuality and about their abuser, particularly if the abuser is close. Remember, 80% of abusers are family friends, not strangers. I don't like my mum and my sisters, my homework, my teachers, my nightmares. I don't like my stomach pump. There you go. That's overdose, big time. She's having nightmares. Here's the thing about nightmares. Little kids have nightmares, big kids have nightmares, and grown-ups have nightmares. When a little kid has a nightmare, crying out in the night, perhaps even screaming, and 3, 4, 5 or 6, and you go in there and the little child says, "Mummy, mummy, there's a monster in the cupboard." Now what are we going to say? Don't be silly, there's no monster. Look, I'll show you. Opens up the cupboard, there's no monster. See, there's no monster. Go back to sleep. Don't be silly. What's the problem with that response? You might say there's no problem with it.
Well, I mean, maybe parents can't see the monster or it's invisible. I mean,
For them, it is a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're denying what's real for them. What else is wrong with that approach?
To call them silly.
You're not validating their feelings.
And what does that communicate?
But instead of, well, I guess it's a bit like when you're teaching kids what's right and wrong, and instead of saying they're a bad boy, you sort of say, well, what they're doing is it's focusing on the action as a person. So by saying they're silly, instead of you actually focusing on them and saying,
Okay.
undermining them.
Okay, now take that one step further. Remember, the silliness now is related to their thinking there's a monster in the cupboard. So what's the problem with saying they're silly in regards to that issue?
They wouldn't be silly.
Oh, well, yeah.
Look at that.
Well, yeah, if there was one in there, it wouldn't be silly. If you really thought there was one, it would not be silly to think that. It should be validating what they feel.
So when you say, don't be silly, there's no monster there, look, I'll show you, and mother opens the cupboard and there's no monster there, where does that leave the child? Nowhere to go. Now the child really does feel they are silly. And there is no monster, so if in the future he has a nightmare, there's no use telling mother about it. So the child's left with a whole lot of confusion. Now, what would be a better approach? What would be a better thing to say to the child? How about this? Question 4. What about saying something like, darling, you're right. There are monsters. This world is full of monsters. But you know what? Jesus is here with us. And Jesus can drive out all the monsters. Because he loves you. And he's going to protect you from the monsters. Okay? Dignity. Creation. 4. The monsters are here. Why don't we pray right now and ask that Jesus will protect you from the monsters and take the monsters away, because he's more powerful than any monster. See, that's redemption, and we're on our way to glory. The child's right. We ought to be terrified of monsters, shouldn't we? It's only of God's mercies that we don't wake up with nightmares every night because of the wicked and evilness of this fallen world and of Satan at work. It's only because of God's mercies that we have a good night's sleep every night. Because he's promised to protect us. He will protect our souls through the hours of darkness, just as he's promised to protect us from the forces of darkness. That's what you can tell your little child. So Judy has nightmares. So we're going to take Judy's nightmares seriously. We're going to ask her about her nightmares. Her nightmares might be related to her overdosing. It might be related to her father. We don't know. But she's drawn nightmares here. My nightmares. They're real to her, so they're real to us. How I feel. Lonely. Hate being on my own. Afraid when in bed. Jealous of girls who look ace and have boys. Private special feelings that no one's going to know about. Why is she afraid when she's in bed? Wouldn't you expect that to be the safest place on earth for a child? What are these private special feelings that you just want to talk about? Okay, that's Judy Shield. What's the picture you're getting about Judy?
Got a lot going on inside.
There's a lot going on inside her, isn't there? There's a lot going on, a heap. Now, if she didn't put it all down here, and it's a mixture of drawing and words, if she didn't draw all that out, how long do you think it would take you to get all that information just through talking with her? Well, you probably never would, because you're an adult, remember? You see how powerful this is as a therapy with children and older children like Judy. Okay, we don't have time really to talk about this one because we're out of time. But this is just something on autism and Asperger's. Now, autism is a disease of the brain, and it is on a spectrum of functionality. You can have a highly functional autistic child or any degree of decreasing functionality for an autistic child. Now, the reason I've given you this is autism in children is a counselling issue that you will encounter. Asperger's syndrome is probably one that's getting most of the press these days. Asperger's is at the high functioning end of autism, and it really shows up in children who are socially inept. I just that's just something for you to read if you're interested in autism. But it is out there, and it is a very, very difficult issue to deal with for children and their families. Well, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to stop there. Do you guys have this book?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. I won't make you buy that one. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that these therapists really do care about children and their care and helping children, and we thank you for that. We thank you that your common grace has provided us these people who really do care about children and want to help them. And we thank you, Father, that your scriptures have equipped us with all that we know to be able to care for one another in the body of Christ. And we thank you that we are able to glean from these theories some distorted truths which we can rework through the scriptures and through our understanding of the gospel and of creation and fall and redemption and glory, and make some of these insights useful to us. We thank you for their observations, and we thank you that in the scriptures we have the explanation for those observations, that we're not dependent on the secular theorists to provide us with the understanding of what goes on inside of people. We pray, Father, that when it comes to the people that we work with of whatever age, that you would increasingly help us to become specialists of the heart, men and women who have the wisdom to step into the heart and the life and the world of another and bring grace and mercy to bear on struggle and pain and hurt and loss, anger and shame and guilt and the host of emotions that many people carry around inside of them. Father, Father, we long to be instruments in your hands. We long to be able to deal gently and carefully with wisdom and insight and with the hearts of others as we keep in step with your Spirit. And we ask, Father, that you continue to grow us and mature us in that regard. We ask in Christ's name. Amen.